Welcome to Obstacle Running Adventures.
Over the last 7 years, we have consistently released weekly episodes focusing on
obstacle course racing, running, and other adventures.
You'll hear interviews, event recaps, conversations about our sport,
quick news updates about happenings in our community.
And now, here are your hosts,
Standing on the corner,
Michael Stefano and Caitlin Ritter.
Hey guys, it's Michael Stefano.
And Caitlin Ritter. And Michael, how was your weekend?
Pretty good. I'd say better than yours. I had a late Christmas in February game night with family last night, which was fun. Went a little long. And you've been extremely sick for like a full week now?
Extremely sick is a large word.
Okay, would I can't even get into the specifics. Needing to shower twice in the middle of the night to try to like cough up all the mucus.
Okay, that's fair.
You've been extremely sick.
Okay.
It's been disgusting. Yes.
But you love me anyway.
I do, but you've been very sick. And I don't know, how long have you slept today in the daytime?
Like 6 hours.
Yes, that's extremely sick. Caitlin, give a shout out to our sponsors.
Shout out Mudgear, use code ADVENTURE for 15% off your next Mudgear purchase, and Caterpie, use code OCR Report20 for 20% off your next Caterpie purchase.
Perfect. We're going to shout out the OCR Report for being a great home for us on the internet, and to Will Hicks.
The Podfather.
Check it out over at the OCRReport.com. They're very excited about one of these news stories coming up in a bit. And to our sponsored athletes.
Javier Escobar, Kelly Sullivan, Ryan Brizolara, and Joshua Reid.
Yes, we accidentally skipped over the patrons, but I have that pulled up here. $5+ Patreon supporters.
Jason Dupree, Samantha Thompson, Dave Claxton, Bradley Keel, Charlotte Engelman, Aaron Grindstaff, Laura and Stephen Ritter, Hank and Arlene Stefano, Kenny West, Cheryl Miller, Jessica Johnson, Nick Riker, Christopher Hoover, Kevin Gregory Jr., Evan Irick, Brent George, Wendell Agash, Logan Nagel, Asa Coddington, and Seth Rinderknecht.
Yeah, Cheryl actually reached out and said that one of the podcasts she listens to reads out the Patreon-specific names, and I guess 10 junk stripper poles is a takeoff of the podcast that she listens to.
Oh.
So like 10 junk miles or something like that.
That's funny.
And we don't have a poll, but we have quite a few Meme of the Weeks. I don't know which one to pick. Caitlin, which of these 5, I guess?
The middle one.
Middle one? Timely.
Oh, that's hilarious. So I'm sure everybody saw Jason...
Kelsey.
Thank you. Jason Kelsey talking to one of the Spice Girls with Taylor Swift next to her.
Is that a Spice Girl? Looks like a small child.
I thought it was, like, Ice Spice or something.
That is a child.
No, it's not a child.
Okay.
And it's Jason talking to her and saying, it's called Tough Mudder. You have to swim through ice and run through electrical wires and stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. Post by Tough Mudder. Moving on, quick news. Again, if you listen to Google Podcasts, please change to a different podcasting app. They are going away, and we do not want to lose you. Also, the Buck Furpies Comedy Fundraiser is coming up on March 9th in Warwick, Rhode Island. And the 2024 New England OCR Expo is going to be April 20th in West Boylston, Massachusetts. We hope to see you guys there. I don't remember if I talked about this last week, but I'm very excited about it. There is a lemon radler that's being offered by Athletic Brewing. And now I'm not a big drinker, but I do like Port Rocker by Sam Adams in the summertime. So this lemon radler, I don't know why they're releasing this in the winter. It's limited time only, which kind of sucks. But I'm very interested in trying that out. That looks delicious.
We can stock up on it for you.
Maybe. I also wanted to mention that applications are open for Team USA OCR. They posted applications for the elite team are now available on usaocr.org. Visit the website or navigate to the link in our bio to access the standard course, short course, and 100-meter forms. We look forward to another exciting World Championship event in Costa Rica. This comes to us from the OCR Report. It says Spartan announces 2 World Championships from Spartan now. So there's the sprint and the 100-meter race.
We should go to the one in Croatia.
Yeah, I have heard Croatia's beautiful. They said that the Spartan Sprint World Championships and Spartan 100-meter World Championships will take place on October 10th through 13th on the island of Hvar in Croatia. So that should be pretty interesting. There are a lot of World Championships, but yeah, that's exciting.
Tom Bosworth has the new world record for the walking fastest mile in history, and he walked that mile in 5 minutes and 31 seconds.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. That was sent to us by
Brett the T-Rex Mills.
Yeah, and weird news story. It's just weird that walking like that is a sport, but it is.
He walks the mile faster than I run the mile.
Oh yeah, significantly. A whole bunch of world records here set now. So we have this Deca mile team's record with Tara Jackson and Marissa Pope. And together for the women's team mile world record, they got 16:01. And then there was another Deca mile record.
Yes, Alexander Walker and Brandon Bonney broke the Decamile world record with a time of 15:07. They said, "Thanks, Bubbles."
Oh, what happened there?
I don't know where it happened, but it just... oh, sorry, it says, "Take that, Bubbles."
Oh, that makes more sense. Different kind of world record, but Jared Newby set the record for the 100-pound half marathon with a time of 1 hour, 47 minutes, and 47 seconds. He broke the existing world record by 22 minutes. He says his next race is going to be in High Rocks, Washington, D.C. for the North American Championships in the Go Ruck division.
He ran a half marathon with 100 pounds faster than I have run a half marathon.
Oh, yeah. Probably faster than you could do... Yeah, faster you could do 10 miles. Actually, I don't know. Yeah, probably.
World's Toughest Mudder has finally revealed their location. It is at Clear Springs Ranch in Bartow, Florida. And it's on Cox Road.
COX?
Yep.
That's pretty funny.
That's good luck, right?
Yeah. Well, do you want to explain to people why?
Oh, that's my mom's maiden name.
Yeah. And I'm going to finish up with podiums from Spartan, Arizona Super. I'll take these since Caitlin's sick. In third place, we have Danny Battle. In second place, Kevin Aller. In first place, friend of the show, Alex Hagen-Weiss. And for the women for the Super, third place was Candace Simpson. Second place was Casey Snow. In first place, Chloe Melkinian, who sounds very familiar. Apologies, I can't think of how I know Chloe. We do somehow. And for the men for the Arizona Sprint, in third place was Joshua Gonzalez. Second place was Danny Battle. In first place was Ethan Brown, who we've had on the show. And for the ladies, third place was Veronica Farnsworth, second place was Candace Simpson, and first place was Chloe Melkinian. Maybe we've just heard her name on the show a lot. Maybe she deserves the time on the show if she hasn't been on already. There's also 5 secret links. Go check them down below, but let's get to what this episode's all about. I'm going through some episodes ideas that have been accruing over the past few years, and this is one that I was excited about. So OCR adaptive athletes is something in our sport that's always been pretty interesting to me. I remember seeing people missing limbs taking on a Spartan Stadium event, and Kayla and I have both worked with All Abilities waves of Boulder Dash in the past. So I reached out to Andy Reid, who is the founder of OCR Adaptive Athletes, and had him on for this episode. So let's hear the interview with Andy. So we'll start off with your name and where you're from.
Okay, hi, I'm Andy Reid. I'm from Scotland. In the north of the UK, the home of Robert the Bruce and Edinburgh Castle, and we actually got a history of the Vikings and the Celtics. So yeah,
that's awesome.
It's a fab place.
Yeah. My grandfather was always big into like teaching me about like Vikings and stuff when I was little, and I always thought it was like the most badass stuff when I was a kid.
It's great.
Real quick with your name, and I'm not sure if you know too much about this, but my wife wanted to ask if it's annoying to have the same exact name as the Kansas City Chiefs head coach. There's a Super Bowl today, and I don't know if you're ever aware of that.
No, I'm not really aware. Yeah,
that's totally fair. It's a uniquely American sport, pretty much. Well, Andy, I'd like to talk about your history in obstacle course racing. So how did you find this fun sport that we call OCR?
Okay, I actually found it through my wife, Caro. She introduced me to OCR in approximately 2015, and I started doing Total Warrior just for fun to see what it was like. And then I after a number of times, I then found I became really competitive. It's just something in me clicked and it's like, okay, Andy, now we're really gonna go for it. I started doing more OCRs. I used to do Toughest in London. I went on to do Judgment Day, and at Judgment Day, I managed to scrape through and qualify for the European Championships in the Netherlands. I became part of Team UK, and I went over and represented the UK over there.
That's awesome. So you mentioned 3 races off the bat that we don't have here in the States. One that I've never heard of, though, Judgment. Tell me all about that race.
Judgment Day was held in the UK, and it's a military style. It was run by military style people, and it was a qualifying race. So the obstacles there are quite demanding and challenging, and you have to complete the obstacles to their rules. They had very strict rules, and you had armbands, and you had to have your armbands all intact by the end of getting to the course. Pretty cool.
Yes. How do you feel about the mandatory completion aspect of sport? Is that what you prefer, or?
Sorry, say that again.
How do you feel about like mandatory obstacle completion in terms of like bans and stuff like that?
I find them quite difficult. I get very stressed prior to the racing. I just tend to go out there and do my best. I don't always do well. For example, when I was at Toughest, just 6 weeks before I went to the Euros, I went over an inverted wall, and I went and cracked my ribs on my left side.
Ouch.
So it's not very good. Yeah. So it's. But I try and do my best. I actually have quite a few conditions. I have pancreas problems. I also have 3 heart problems, and I had a heart procedure. I also have a rare immune system. It's a lung condition, and it affects many of my organs. I'm also dyslexic as well, and I have what used to be called a lazy eye in the old days, and I have nerve damage in the other eye, in my right eye, and I also have asthma. So I kind of like a marvel to medical science, really. But my legs and arms keep going, so on that side of things, I'm okay.
Yeah. So I think that's a good segue into what made you want to create the OCR adaptive athletes as a group.
Okay, with my diagnosis, I get very stressed out. With my dyslexia, I have problems around having no short-term memory. I've got long-term memory only. So things about information being told, where things are, I can remember. But if you suddenly ask me, what have I just said, then I have trouble recalling. And also, I question myself if I'm having these problems. I met another guy, Anthony Howard Jackson, and he was having problems. He had a different diagnosis, and we got chatting, and we were saying, this is not good. It's really not good. The OCR event that we were at, it just did not provide the needs that we needed to be able to understand and function to our best of our abilities. And we thought, well, if this is happening to us, what about other adaptive people? We don't actually see ourselves as a disability, because I kind of see disability, the term disability as outdated. It's very much associated historically with bad treatments and abusive treatments of
Right.
people with disability, um, and also going into asylums and those kind of issues. So we're more adaptive, so it's more inclusive. We can show our abilities more in a positive light to people. Um, it was interesting that I watched the Invictus Games on Netflix, and they on that show they had a South Korean athlete who is a Blade Runner, and he was saying that in South Korea disability is hidden, and he said also that when the public do meet people with athletes with disabilities, they're really amazed about what they can achieve. So that kind of equates with how I see the world. That is very much about body power rather than what you can't do, which is what term disability suggests that you cannot function like able-bodied people or be integrated. It's you push to a side.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important. A lot of people feel like many people would feel like it's just semantics, like, oh, what's the difference in words? But words are everything, right? Like, are you going to focus on what you can't do as a person, or are you going to focus on the barriers that you can overcome as a person? And to me, I think it's more important to phrase things and to look at things in a more positive direction too. And you talk about like mental asylums and all that stuff. Like, I don't think people realize like how it wasn't all that long ago that like that was kind of rampant all around the world, right?
Yeah, very much so. It's horrific. I mean, it's absolutely, dare I say, criminal of the treatment, and it was just covered over or whitewashed. And even now, people, and I have to. It's complicated that the term disability is still kind of intertwined with adaptive. It's in some ways I find it difficult not to say adaptive without saying disability, but it's I don't know how else to explain it really.
Yeah.
So I need to go back to your question. Sorry, I got a bit.
No, that's fine.
Um,
What does being the founder entail of this group?
Oh gosh, a lot of work. Where do I begin? Okay, so me and Anthony had several meetings. We discussed about setting it up, and we what we had to do was we didn't know exactly how many adaptive athletes, if any adaptive athletes, were out there in the big wide world. So I Anthony's skills were in business. And I respect him a lot. He's ex-army. He has a business background, so his area expertise was on that side. My side was to do with research. So I had to work out which countries had OCR races, the whole spectrum of different diverse OCR races. So there's 156 countries in the world, and I then had to find out from each of those countries whether or not they had or hosted an OCR race in whatever, whether it's a small family one or a large corporate one. So I spent absolute hours checking the details, finding the names of these OCR races. Then I had to contact each of these different OCR races to build up a database. And the database is confidential, and it has the names of the person of contact and then the contact addresses and so forth. So from that, I had to message out. We had to do a lot of publicity. So I'm not technically minded, and my way of doing things was to do messaging information of who we are, what our aims are. Anthony, he's more technically minded, so he was the guy who established our Facebook page and the logo. So that was how that side of things. And then, we got the contacts, we built up a database. And then we had to find people and make contact with members who came and joined our group. And we found from the members that there was two ways of thinking. There's those that say my disability is part of me, and it's who I am. This is who I am. You accept my disability. But then in the other camp, there's people that are saying I have a disability, but I ignore it. I go out there and I challenge life obstacles. I advocate my rights. Very proactive. So there's two very different avenues, two different ways of looking at things. Now, within obstacle racing, the members who have actively been involved in OCR or tried it have said that they, on one side, they want to participate in an OCR race alongside able-bodied people like anyone else. No concessions, no adaptation of the obstacles. And then on the other side, people are saying, well, I actually quite relish the chance of running against another adaptive athlete to see what I can do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rivalry there. So that's really important to understand, and is, if you like, the core of how OCR Adaptive Athletes Group functions. We take a holistic approach. So it's not just about the members' way of how they approach OCR sports. It's also the other things around that. So you're looking at the prices of entrance fees for obstacle racing, incredibly expensive. We don't have the money at the same high level as OCR race directors are asking for. There's issues about if you have an adaptive car or vehicle, or if we've got family and friends and supporters who take you there. You need to be near to the registration tents. There's also issues around toilets. Have you got wheelchair access to toilets?
Right.
We also do address issues about sportswear. Sportswear for obstacle course racing is mainly for able-bodied people, whereas there's not much. There isn't any, as far as I'm aware, of Pacific OCR sportswear for persons in a wheelchair. So the issues of that is that if you just have normal tracky bottoms and a t-shirt, when you get cold and wet, or you're in a wheelchair for a long time, it rucks up your skin and it causes pressure sores, and you can get there's those issues. And also we have a lot of women adaptive athletes who have raised the issue of there's a real underrepresentation of women and girl athletes within the sport of OCR. The OCR sport is primarily, since it was first came on the global scene, it's mainly for able-bodied men. It's very masculine. If you look at how it's marketed and advertised, it's very masculine male. But it also has a lot of able-bodied. The adverts show a lot of able-bodied women. No, that's not connecting with the adaptive community is not representative. It's not showing the visible role models that should be in the adverts. It's important to understand that also within our group, you have visible adaptive athletes. So you've got the wheelchair athletes, you've got the athletes with the blade running, you've got blind athletes that run with the guide runner. But you've got the very invisible. So that can be like cancer, athletes with cancer, athletes with fibromyalgia, which is a disease that affects the nervous system and the joints. It's a chronic pain. Autism, people are not aware of autism. So on this neurodivergent, even my dyslexia is an invisible. That's difficult for members of the public to know how to appropriately communicate or support or guide us.
Yeah.
It's a real issue. So we basically encouraged members to join, and that was established in 2019. We started the group. We now have 1,375 members worldwide. They're not all adaptive athletes. We do have family members and we have friends. We also have supporters, and we have a lot of assistant runners that run with wheelchair athletes. And from that, we also not only do we do the holistic, the rounded support and all the different issues that we have on our group that we post up information about, but we've also got a worldwide Hall of Fame. Now that's really important because it is a roll call of adaptive athletes, both male and female, that we have found evidence of the athletes actively participating in worldwide OCR races around the world. So we use evidence from YouTube videos, or it may be from newspaper articles or word of mouth or pictures. As long as we've got evidence to back up the adaptive athletes, what they're saying, or then we can. We also have gender neutral athletes that join our group as well, and we've also, because we've just recently had a lady who's transitioning from a man to a female in a wheelchair, but she also has Tourette's syndrome as well. So it's very much about communication, listening, understanding. That with communication, it can be very intermittent because of the clicks, noisings, and members of the public can find that difficult to deal with. We also have a lot of deaf members join the group, and we also have a lot of varying levels of visual impairment, and their guide runners. They come and join the group as well. So yeah, we have 1,175 odd members, and the roll call that we do is there to. Sorry, I've got a cat here called Pip, and he's in the way. The roll call is to help raise awareness of just how many active adaptive athletes there are around the world, and also it's to help inspire the younger generation, and the generations after that, because there isn't anything in the world as we know that like our group. It's unique. All the members are pioneering, and we use the word pioneers because they are changing the world, not only within the OCR scene, but they're changing the world and raising awareness and showing the world what they can do. They're showing the OCR directors and race organisers of the body power that they have to achieve the courses, or not even achieve, but to go around the course within their own capabilities, how they choose to want to do their OCR race. And I think marshals and, sorry, the cat's here, it's very much listening and learning to adaptive athletes. Take away the assumptions, take away the preconceived ideas of what it is to be an adaptive athlete, and actually start to learn from the heart what it can be, how adaptive OCR needs to change to be more inclusive, and that is a way through. Yeah.
I like that. So going back a little bit, there's a few things there, a bunch of things there that I'd like to touch on. You talked about like reaching out to the different countries and stuff and the different races. Do you also work with different federations too? With the UK, I think of James Burton.
Yes.
US, we have like Dirty D, who's head of adaptive athletes in the United States.
Yeah.
How does that work?
In the past, when I got involved in the races, I was invited to join World Obstacle as a voluntary member of the Adaptive Athletes Commission. And my role there was to research and advise and give guidance for what best practice can be within OCR races. So I was working a lot with the Philippines OCR Federation, and my work there was convincing that it was more important to use the term adaptive, because prior to that, the World Obstacles had used the word para. Now, the word para is associated with the Paralympics.
Right.
And this doesn't relate. It gives out the message that if you're a para athlete, somehow or other, you are going to be connected with OCR that then goes through to the Paralympics. Well, that's not correct. So with adaptive, it's been about more inclusive. You haven't got the categories that you have in the Paralympics. So that was a real problem. And the problem with OCR is that it has, probably no fault of its own, it's gone through the route of using the Paralympic categories. Like there's T for track events or F for field, and then you've got the different numbers that equate to assessments of para athletes, how from how able to how not able a person is able to to do something, and then the athlete is put into the different categories. So my work with Al was about showing the differences of definition and explaining why we OCR adaptive athletes are taking the path of we want to establish our own, because we're independent of Spartan Power, we are independent of World Obstacle, we're just independent of everything. So I also had exchanges, conversations with British Obstacle Sports, and they were getting very confused, and because they use power. And again, it was about communication. It was about awareness and learning the difference. As you may be aware, obstacle sport, the Spartan, Joe Senna and Ian Anderson, who's the president of World Obstacle, they teamed up with the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, and they did a number of obstacle race examples, both for able-bodied athletes and for adaptive athletes in Turkey and in another place I can't recall. And it's been agreed that OCR's sport, as in the context of 100-meter course with varying obstacles, will be included in the Olympic Games, 2028 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. So that's caused, in my mind, me personally saying this, it's caused a problem that for adaptive athletes within the Olympics is going to be the 100-meter OCR course will be part of the pentathlon. So it'll be Olympic pentathlon athletes who are able-bodied will be participating in that race as part of the pentathlon. But my question is, for adaptive athletes, this raises a really serious issue. I contacted the pentathlon GB team, and they confirmed with me, I have it in writing, that they said they won't be hosting an OCR, the equivalent OCR race in the Paralympics. So this is a really critical issue. As you know, is it fair that on one hand, the Olympic Games has the 100-meter OCR pentathlon, and yet the Paralympics are not? So I'm just going to let World Obstacle deal with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and you know, you could see that. Well, in my mind, that I view that as discrimination, because in the past, if you've had one sport in the Olympics, it's normally accepted into the Paralympics.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I wonder, like, what it would take to do that extra step. I don't know anything about the federations or the decision making and all that stuff that goes into it, but yeah, you would think that if it's in the Olympics, it should also be the Paralympics to some extent as well.
Yeah, and there's matters around World Obstacle where they give out information, or one paragraph they refer or use the term Paralympics, and then in the next sentence they use adaptive. So that's causing
confusion.
Yeah,
makes sense. Another thing that you mentioned too is how the community is almost kind of split in half in terms of wanting to, push through and work on their adaptiveness to race with everybody else, and then the other half wants to, have like their own category and stuff like that. As like the federation that you guys are, how do you kind of like split your efforts? Like how is that balance?
Well, this is from OCR Adaptive Athletes Group. We view this as a difficulty. Firstly, there's within the World Obstacle, they have their own. Sorry, the cat is just. I've got a pet cat that's trying to get in on yet. World Obstacle, they have their own policies and they got their own criteria for training. But there's a problem with the training they provide is not geared appropriately for adaptive athletes. By that I mean adaptive athletes haven't been consulted, or it doesn't seem that they have been consulted in how the training structure is provided. Basically, what they seem to be doing is they seem to be having trainers and instructors who go through the able-bodied normal, whatever that means, the normal structure of becoming a qualified instructor, and then the World Obstacles adapted that to be integrated into the sport of OCR. But then it seems to me that they also only specialise in adaptive athletes after They have qualified in able-bodiedness
Right.
training. So I feel, from our point of view, that there needs to be assertive, active involvement, asking adaptive athletes on the best way, the best process of training the athletes, because we don't fit in existing training plans and policies. We need to initiate our own unique OCR training rules and guidelines that equate with the sport of OCR, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because no one wants to be seen as or feel as if they're just an afterthought, right?
Yeah. There's also problems. I need to raise awareness about gyms. There's very few adaptive gyms. Over here in the UK, there are a few. There's a sensory gym that started, and there's another adaptive gym in Manchester. And I believe in America you have a few adaptive specific gyms, but this raises questions of having time to go, the cost, about accessibility if you're in a wheelchair, or how do you integrate varying visual impairments and neurological. At the moment it seems that only certain adaptive athletes can only have access and the time and the money to go to these gyms. And I think there strongly needs to be a much more adaptive gyms around, so they're more accessible to help with the sport of OCR.
Yeah.
Because these gyms that are not OCR specific training places, and the ones in the UK that are part of Optical Sports Federation, who are also part of the World Optical Federation, their setup is very much for able-bodied men and women. It's not geared. It's not. It's too top down. It's not. All the wording and the courses are all designed for able-bodied. It's written in language that is not suitable for adaptive athletes. It's not accessible, as in it's not using technology and media that could be used to help understand and communicate with. So that needs to be radically changed if the adaptive athletes are to be integrated within the UK, but not only UK. You could apply that worldwide, really.
Yeah, I love that in your definition of adaptive athlete. It covers such a great variety of ways that people can be adapting to what life has given them, but it's also difficult and because there's like so many things that like can apply. So I mean, when you think of like Joe DeSena's like rip 10 million people off the couch, this and that, like this should apply to everyone, whether you're an adaptive athlete or a regular person. So I think it is vital that like we spend the time thinking, what can races do better? I know we have a local race by us called Boulder Dash. Actually, that medal right there. They have a all abilities team. It used to be called Find Your Bold Team. It's changed names, but it has members of people that have autism spectrum disorder. It has a woman, Nina, who has cerebral palsy, I believe. She's in a wheelchair, and we take her out of the wheelchair and we put her over the wall, and it's a great time. And she has like a whole wave of just like the all abilities team, and that is I've been in the sport for a long time. That is the only race that I can think of that has made that extra effort into how can we address the needs of the people that other people don't think of. So are there any races that you see by you that seem to be doing it right?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would say, with no question, I would say the Philippines Obstacle Federation are literally the gold standard in obstacle racing. If you join our OCR Adaptive Athletes group on Facebook, you will see videos examples of how they use the 1 meter obstacle course, which is the same kind of course that they will use at the Olympics in 2028. They have got adaptive athletes like Callum Jr., Ebius, Andrella, who's visually partially sighted. They use Callum is an amputee, and he just swings through the obstacles like so fast. It's just you have to watch it to really learn how the body power just flies through. Me personally, I don't see any disability. What I do see is the body power. I see how the body adapts and is creative and how it goes through the obstacles. You have to understand that you can't apply able-body OCR training to of obstacles to adaptive athletes, because with adaptive athletes, we have our own way of negotiating and using our bodies to tackle or get over or through or under. So with the Philippines Obstacle Federation, and Alberto is the chief of there, they use both able body mixed with adaptive athletes. As in relation to adaptive athletes, they compete to a higher level. Where they're adaptive is they, with the visual impairment, they have a guide runner who will tap an obstacle. So you're communicating with sound, also with verbal prompts to guide the visually impaired athlete along. Also, with overhead obstacles, you have markers, but the guide runner is allowed to lift the adaptive athlete up onto the overhead obstacle. And I'm not kidding. Andrea, I should say, sorry. She swings on the monkey bars. She's visually impaired. She can't see it, and she's just swinging from obstacles. The good thing about obstacle racing, it's a really, really good tactile sport.
Yeah.
The obstacles are made from wood or metal, but it's really, really good. You have to try it.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's all about, obviously, trust and you practice. I don't recommend just going out and doing it as a one-off. No. You have to practice with a qualified guide runner or instructor. But yeah, and they would do as much as they can. So even if you can't make it to the end of an overhead obstacle, you still gain scores and credits like anyone else. So that helps with the issues of equality. But also at the end of the course, they have the Everest obstacle where it goes up into the air and you've got the curve at the top. And, even if you've got a leg amputee or blade runner or visually impaired, they still go up because they've got the ropes. So they grab hold of the ropes and then pull themselves up as far as they can go. And then they gradually slide down. But then at the end of it, they get congratulations, they get the medal. So it's all inclusive. Yeah. And a really good example was also at the World Championships, I think it's pronounced Ghent, in Belgium, where they included the adaptive athletes on their version of the 100-meter course with the various obstacles. And the crowd were absolutely mesmerized. They are absolutely you could see on the video, they were just in a state of shock. Those members of the public and the able-bodied people were all reacting very differently to this experience that they've never. You can see on their faces they thought, oh no, he or she wouldn't be able to do it, but they were really very educational, very, very, very inspiring.
Yeah, in the States we have a few athletes that come to mind. There's Pete Calhoun, I think they call him Blind Pete, who is, as the name suggests, blind. There's Samuel Shades Kohler, who has achromatopsia, which means that he's not able to see in the light. I think he needs to wear like sunglasses so he's able to like see when it's much darker. There's people that have barriers with height, as I mentioned before. Dirty D, I can't think of her last name right now, but Katasbody, her and her twin sister. That they if they can't reach the obstacles, like how are they going to start? So there's a lot of barriers there. What are some other athletes in the UK that people in the States may not be aware of that are also adaptive athletes?
Yeah, and it's also along with that, it's very much about communication.
Right.
It's very much about looking at how a person communicates. From my own experience and from video evidence, I watch a lot of OCR races, and when you're on the start line and you're in the pen or in the group, if you are deaf, so a lot of the time you have, it's very important to guide a deaf athlete to the front because they need to be able to lip sync information. And at the moment, what I'm seeing is, and hearing about, is that most of the OCR races, I haven't seen any of the race directors have a sign language interpreter on the start line, because this is really critical and it's really important because they got the briefing on safety briefings about the obstacles and any dangers that may be on the course. So it's really essential that there should be a sign language interpreter.
Definitely.
Whether it's voluntary or in a paid capacity, but I really strongly view that as an essential part of obstacle course racing, because you can't assume that there's not deaf person in. Like I said earlier, it's an invisible disability. So, I think OCR race directors and organisers need to be really aware of that.
Yeah, definitely. So we talked a little bit about like athletes. I know that also, again, in the States, because that's really what I know most about here. We have organizations such as More Heart Than Scars. We have Team Oscar Mike, which some of them are a little bit more like military focused and more of the plainly seen adaptive athletes and not as much as the like invisible ones. But what do you guys have for like groups or associations that help out at races over by you guys too?
Over here we have Sean Gash, who's a wheelchair athlete, and they have No Fears or Wheels, and they race with assistant runners. They have assistant runners who use ropes on the wheelchair, and it's pulled along like a chariot. And that's a Born Survivor, which is a military-style personnel that has set that up. We have Zeus races. They have adaptive athletes. We don't have actually many hard. Well, that's all we have. There's Born Survive. Mac Tough recently had a female Blade Runner and upper body amputation, and Mac Tough. They're based in Scotland. One of the original OCR races in the UK. They recommended this lady to come and join our OCR adaptive athletes group because there's just no, like I said earlier, there's just no groups like us. So it's good, but it's also bad that there's not more information out there about raising awareness, which is another issue.
Yeah.
You know, how do you get to know about which races are catering or support the needs of adaptive athletes? As I said, we need more role models. We need OCR media to advertise more visual role models of adaptive athletes, both for males, but more so for women, because there's issues around self-confidence and body image.
Yep.
We need more adaptive athletes on the podium, and also wheelchair athletes on podiums. That's another big issue.
Ideally, I think of, when we announce we do like a quick news segment on our show, and we talk about podiums and mostly OCR, but like we're pretty close to Boston, so we talk about the Boston Marathon, we talk about all these other marathons, and we talk about like the wheelchair winners too. Like we've had Tatiana McFadden on the show, who is a Paralympic athlete who's incredible, as well as Dan, I can't think of his last name, but like there's a lot of amazing athletes out there. When you think of marathons and a lot of like road running sports, on one hand, it's a lot easier to make things more adaptive for them, but they get a lot of credit in those sports, and I would like to see a day where we have the same thing in OCR too.
Yeah, this is a real crucial issue, a real crucial important matter. As when you think about when obstacle racing was first started and how quickly it spread around the world, it kind of left adaptive athletes out of on the sidelines.
Yeah.
It didn't develop to include adaptive athletes, adaptive people within the sport, and it should have included adaptive athletes in the management levels, the different management levels. It needs to include adaptive people in the developing policies and rules and regulations. So that is a critical way of including and hearing the voices and the different forms of communication from adaptive athletes within the sport. It's actually benefit the OCR sport worldwide.
What are some of your favorite stories or things that you've seen in person of adaptive athletes overcoming barriers on an obstacle course?
I think the most amazing and memorable OCR athlete I've seen is Andrea and Callum Jr. in the Philippine Obstacle Federation. I mean, they are staggering, as in whatever they achieve. I can't praise them enough. They truly are the role models of OCR sports. People like Misty Diaz, who you probably would aware, she's an adaptive athlete, high profile in America. She has cerebral palsy, and she uses sticks to get around. I would say that all adaptive athletes within the sport of OCR are, like I say, pioneers. Yeah. They all individually have their own unique way of competing, participating in the sport of OCR. Yeah. And by doing that, they are the experts. They are showing race directors, they're showing marshals, they're showing the public, they're showing friends and family, acquaintances, just what can be achieved at varying levels. And I think in this day and age, that seriously needs to be listened to, learn from, and to enhance what from that can be developed. And I think that's, in this day and age, I think that's crucially important. Really is.
Yeah, because it's inspiring, right? Absolutely.
Yes, it's more than inspiring. I don't think inspiring is a good enough word. I think pioneering is a suitable. Probably, I don't know what. All I can say is pioneering. That's how I view it. Yeah.
obviously the responsibility of making sure this sport is inclusive falls on race directors and the governing bodies and everything. But when it comes to being a good participant of the sport, and you're just kind of out there doing a fun lap, like what would you say is that the best way for a regular person on the course to support an adaptive athlete?
Okay. This is quite a lot. We are saying that fundamentally, adaptive athletes need to go first in the wave system that exists in those other sports. That's because it takes time to get around course, and our view is that able-bodied elite OCR athletes should be able to complete a course even if they're last in a race wave or after adaptive athletes. I think there's the elite athletes have got to that kind of stage where they can cope with any kind of terrain and obstacle, whether it's muddy or whatever. I think adaptive athletes definitely need to go first. We also recognise that although a lot of OCR sports use smoke flares among able-bodied, I think there needs to be serious recognition that because asthma is an invisible diagnosis, that smoke flares should not be used. And also for military personnel or anyone that's has PTSD, post-traumatic distress disorder, there shouldn't be any loud noises, no loud bangs or gunfire or fireworks. The reason for this is it can trigger off horrific experiences among people who are diagnosed with PTSD. Also, with regards wheelchair athletes, I think that marshals and OCR race directors need to have a prior meeting or like a Zoom meeting or some formal conversation about how they're going to tackle the obstacles, how do they want marshals to support them. Does it mean, for example, that it's just reliant on the assistant runners that communicate with the wheelchair adaptive athletes? Just basically how they want to tackle the course. In regards to visual impairment, I think that varying levels of visual impairment, I think there needs to be sign languages or members of staff who have been trained to support and guide visually impaired athletes and friends. It's not just about the athletes, it also can be family members or friends. Right. You mustn't make the assumption that all people that have come to support adaptive athletes are able-bodied. They may too have maybe adaptive as well. So it's very much about, again, communication, maybe using Braille, maybe asking the adaptive athlete with visual impairment, how would he or she would like to be supported? What are the needs that she or he needs? With autism, maybe it's again communicating directly with the athlete, knowing about autism. It's also about learning about best practice. It's also about having areas, because OCR venues with their registration tents can be very stressful. There's a lot of people walking about. So you need to have areas where there's space to relax, to come, to be able to take time. Again, that's the same with dyslexics and having information on coloured card in large print. Also, we recommend that there's a visual how adaptive athletes are expected to, what are the rules for that, managing that obstacle, and show maybe adaptive figures going over. I mean, using a video would be ideal because then it connects and relates with the adaptive athletes on how best or how it could be recommended to tackle that obstacle. We also recommend that there's secure places for prosthetic limbs. Also, when you in a registration tent, having the table lower,
Yes.
so that people in wheelchairs can be on the level with the table, and that marshals are coming from the same face-to-face level. So that might mean that a marshal needs to kneel down or sit down on a chair so you're on an equal level with the wheelchair athletes. Yeah, it's all about communication. Again, with varying degrees of deafness, it's a positioning the deaf athlete so you are face to face. The deaf athlete can lip sync and see your facial expression. Also, never turn your back on a deaf athlete. Never walk away while you're communicating. Making sure ask them for all adaptive athletes with the various forms of communication. If you're not sure if they've understood what you're trying to communicate, always ask again. What do they understand? What have they learned from what you've said?
Right.
And if you need be, rephrase what you are asking for or want them to do or whatever. Always ask again, and if need, phrase it in a different way so it's easier for that she or he to understand. That is critically important.
Yeah, it's a lot of things that many people take for granted and wouldn't think of all these things. It's a lot to deal with, but it's worth making the extra effort to make it so it's more inclusive for people.
Yeah.
So
the facilities are there. It's just a question of tweaking. Over here we say tweaking. Just thinking about things in the pre-planning stage. And this is why I said earlier, it's so important for adaptive persons to be integrated in the setting up of obstacle courses, the different types of obstacles, and within the management structure. That they really need to, the OCR race directors really need to learn that. It doesn't dismiss the ability to have a good obstacle course race. Right. It actually enhances the OCR race because the adaptive community, the diverse adaptive community, we actually recognize that they've actually thought about it and used different forms of communication to connect with adaptive athletes, especially for women and men. But we also want to encourage adaptive girls and boys because it's not just about the older generation; it's the younger generations that need to be included and brought on board.
Absolutely, there's a lot of changes that would be ideal. What would you consider success for OCR adaptive athletes? What would you consider a success? Your organization?
That's an very interesting question. At the moment, when we're doing research on worldwide OCRs, the numbers don't even come up as there's no number. If you look at it in OCR races around the world, there are hot spots whether there may be one or two adaptive athletes will enter an OCR race, which is predominantly able-bodied men and women. So it's like one or two, and that's from word of mouth. Like for example, with Spartan in Hungary, there's a leg amputee guy who's very famous. But he's won in thousands of able-bodied men and women. In the Philippines, they have a totally different cultural approach to OCR, more forward-thinking. Like I emphasized earlier, the really gold standard. And they have a lot more adaptive athletes from the whole spectrum. In America, yes, again, it's very sporadic. You may get one or two athletes in an OCR race, but then when you look at the World Obstacle World Championships in Belgium last year, there was a big contingency, the big grouping of diverse adaptive athletes in one place. So you could argue that's good, which it is, but it's not representative of all OCR races. Is only an example, which is a good example, but when you spread the numbers out among all the OCR races globally, we don't even register. There's no data. We can't put a percentage because we don't exist in some ways, So it's important. That's really important. Why these hotspots, although they're good in terms of raising awareness and advertising, and people can see them.
Yeah,
there is a insanely massive project need for inclusion of adaptive athletes, raising awareness worldwide in the different languages, different cultures. You need to address different cultures.
Yeah.
There's real issues in Africa as well. If you're adaptive, it brings shame on your family, or they will go to the local witch doctor, or they'll see the tribal differences to adaptive athletes. Is shockingly different, which is another issue. So it's very much about raising awareness. How do you get awareness? Having access to information, and is the information in a format that is relevant to the adaptive athletes? Again, it goes about how you communicate. Is it using Braille? Is it using immediate technology like an iPad? Is it word of mouth? And then another really big issue is about the cost. Again, I think that is a fundamental issue for adaptive athletes. If you've got to pay for medication or care needs, or if you've got to pay for a data ride, taxi, we just don't have the money on the same level that able-bodied participants have who may be working. A lot of us, we don't work because we're on care needs, or we're under medical guidance from doctors and consultants, or our diagnosis, wide-ranging diagnosis prevents us from being able to be employed. And if we are employed, we're on very low wages, and that needs to really radically change. The whole, the sporting world, in terms of OCR, radically needs to change. It radically needs to sit up and wake up. Sorry, I'm very passionate.
No, yeah, you should be passionate. Yeah. Absolutely. And speaking about awareness, I hope this episode does its fair share, but where can people find out more about your group, OCR Adaptive Athletes?
We're on Facebook. It's OCR Adaptive Athletes, and just link on to our page and answer the questions, and we'll invite you in, and you will become a pioneer. You will helping to change the world of obstacle course racing.
Yeah. Awesome, Andy. Well, thank you so much for taking the time for this interview, and even more so for seeing a change in the world, in the sport that was needed, and making an effort to try to remedy the grand situation.
Always welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you, Andy Reid, for taking the time to come on the show. Really appreciated it, and hope your Facebook group continues to expand more. For related episodes, the only one I can really think of is episode 287 with Samuel Shades Kohler. I know I've had other adaptive athletes on for like bits and pieces of other episodes, but I think that's the only one that I've really focused on one. And that was Samuel Shades Kohler on achromatopsia, driving awareness, and more. Links down below, so would you kindly check it out?
Subscribe and follow wherever you get your podcasts. We love reviews on that Purple Podcast app, so feel free to leave them.
Yeah, if you could support us on social media, follow and all that fun stuff, let people know that there are people that listen to the show. Appreciate that. You can also support us on Patreon for as little as $2, as many as $10, and it's a great way to get all sorts of behind-the-scenes looks at interviews and this and that, and actually I did an interview earlier today, which will be the next episode, with the Grey Betties. So look forward to that. Caitlin, do you have a joke or a quote?
I have both. My quote is, "You are not out of time. You have not missed out on what was meant for you. As long as you are breathing, you will know new beginnings." And my quote is, my joke is, what did they call George Washington's false teeth?
What?
Presidentures.
Oh, that's pretty funny. All right, well, that just about wraps it up. My name is Michael Stefano.
And my name is Caitlin Ritter.
We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to our show and write us a review on your favorite podcast app.
You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook and connect with us there.
Most importantly, we would appreciate it if you shared an episode with a friend so we can reach more ears
and continue to effectively shine a light on the people in our sport, as well as the events that we are so passionate about.
Our intro song is Street Crew by Straight Up, and our outro music is Iron Call by The Best.
How's your weekend going?
Okay, yeah, it's not too bad. We're busy looking after the cat.
Oh, yeah.
A cat called Pip.
Yeah, you got a cat right off screen over here.
He's my kind of manager as well.
Nice.
He says his next race is going to be